But WWE had its Elimination Chamber event in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia for the first time yesterday, the Chamber on one of these Saudi shows. A show that was rumored all week long. All I read about online, twists and turns, major twists and turns planned for the road to WrestleMania here at this show. And what it ended up being was one of the more predictable WWE shows. A pretty mid show overall. Although you guys thought it was a thumbs down show. I don't even think the show got 20% thumbs up in the poll on Twitter. I thought it was very mid. Brock Lesnar is the WWE champion, which I knew he would be the moment he was inserted into the match. You had to know he was not losing on back-to-back pay-per-views. Becky Lynch is still the Raw Women's Champion, which she had to be. To get to her and Bianca Belair at WrestleMania, Bianca will challenge Becky Lynch by virtue of her winning the Women's Elimination Chamber match. And Roman Reigns, Goldberg, just like he said he would in Big Bill's final match for now. That was the last match on his contract. To retain the Universal Championship, I knew my trusty voodoo doll would come in handy. I had to resort to a little bit of black magic. I didn't trust them, so you're welcome. And much love to Fawaz out there in Saudi for the sound-off sign that was visible all throughout the show. That's the second straight show over there that he has gotten the sound-off logo on camera, and I love him for it. So thank you, Fawaz. Thanks also to Magic Spoon for sponsoring yesterday's review. If the idea of a cereal that tastes like the ones you ate as a kid, only healthier, sounds as appealing to you as it did to me, then go to magicspoon.com/Solomonster. Use the code Solomonster at checkout and get yourself $5 off your order. I know some of you have already jumped on this. People genuinely excited about this because some people didn't even know that this was a thing. Once I found out that it was, I got in touch with them. I said, we got to make this happen. So I'm very happy to have them on as a sponsor. I hope you go support. Goldberg in his match with Roman Reigns. Goldberg looked fine. He hit a few spears. He tried for a jackhammer, but never actually hit it. I think it's for the best to not have him lifting the biggest star in the company up in the air. He went out in the guillotine. Referee called for the stoppage. And Big Bill now can ride off into the sunset until, of course, they offer him a new contract, which they will. Whenever they have a need for another big name, they will call upon Goldberg. Bianca Belair, I mentioned she won the Chamber. Alexa Bliss, this was her first match since Extreme Rules against Charlotte Flair back in September. On Raw last Monday, I love how Alexa just entered herself into the Chamber match with about 20 minutes left in the show. This was after they showed her final therapy session on TV. Just like that, poof. Oh, I see there's a spot open. I think I'll take it. They had the graphic already. But it looked like she had finally made real progress in these segments that have been airing now on TV for weeks. When all of a sudden her therapist handed her a new Lily doll. One of those WWE shop Lily dolls. Only this one had the remains of the old Lily doll stuffed inside. And he told her, make sure that you never go anywhere without it. How is that progress? We're right back to where we started with this stuff. When the whole thing started, her carrying around that fucking doll. Except she didn't have the doll with her yesterday. Even though the doctor told her to, she didn't come out with the doll. But she is still dressing and acting like she was the last time we saw her in the ring. So I'm not sure what the point of any of this therapy crap even was. This therapy stuff was pointless. God, I sound like Tony Soprano now. According to PW Insider, at one point this weekend, the discussed finish of the Women's Chamber was a double pin with Bianca and Alexa, where Bianca would get her shoulder up right at the last second as a way to protect Bliss in her first match back, but they ended up deciding against it. And you know what? I agree. If Bianca is the one going to WrestleMania and challenging for the title, then she should go over decisively. But it was weird to bring Alexa Bliss back just to beat her. You know, I pointed out on the stream yesterday, they did the same thing with Sasha Banks last month. They brought her back on SmackDown on a Friday, And the very next day at the Royal Rumble, she enters at number 1. She didn't even last 10 minutes in the Royal Rumble. And they had Zelina Vega dump her out of the ring, or I think knock her off the apron. And that was the end of Sasha Banks. Now, there are a lot of fans very upset about Liv Morgan not winning the Chamber and Alexa Bliss not winning the Chamber. And I'm not going to go on a whole rant like I did in the review yesterday because I was in rare form with that. But look, the reality is, if you've been paying attention to anything that's been going on, then this should not come as a surprise to you. I don't know why people were so upset. Liv Morgan had her program. It ran. It's over. She had several matches with Becky Lynch. She was unsuccessful at every turn. And clearly, she was never the one planned to go to WrestleMania and get some big championship win. It was never in the cards. People allowed themselves to be convinced into, thinking that it was. They just needed somebody in the interim for her to challenge and for her to feud with, that being Becky, until they got to Mania. And now, it's WrestleMania season, and Liv Morgan, she did her best. She did what was expected of her. I thought she, got more television time than she ever has before, but it's over. And for Alexa Bliss, I don't know what they have planned for her, but clearly it is not a Raw Women's Championship match at WrestleMania. The person going to WrestleMania to challenge for the title is the correct person. Drew McIntyre, Madcap Moss, Falls Count Anywhere. Very scary spot. It looks like he's fine. I don't know how they didn't stop the match when it happened. Gave him an Alabama slam. Came down, compressed his neck right down into the mat. But it looks like he's going to be okay. Poor Drew. His last 3 WrestleManias, he worked Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, and Bobby Lashley. 2 of those being for the WWE Championship. And now, most likely, Happy Corbin. Talk about a come down. But that's what it's looking like right now for Drew McIntyre for WrestleMania. Speaking of WrestleMania, The Miz, after his loss on the kickoff show to Rey Mysterio, there was a backstage segment. Him teasing that he's going to go find a partner. He's got a tag team partner in mind. He was going to go make a phone call. And per PW Insider, it looks like it's going to be Logan Paul, who they used at WrestleMania last year with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Well, it looks like they're bringing him back. And you couple this with the rumor of Johnny Knoxville possibly challenging Sami Zayn for the Intercontinental title that Sami won from Shinsuke Nakamura on Friday. Or it aired Friday. Actually happened 2 weeks ago. But they're going heavy on the attractions and the celebrities for WrestleMania this year. Lita, I thought she looked good in her loss to Becky Lynch. If that is her last big match, she went out on a high note. But I think after that performance, as hard up as they are for stars, they're going to be calling upon her in the future for more matches. And then we had the main event, the Men's Elimination Chamber. There was a spot early in the match with Seth Rollins giving Austin Theory a buckle bomb through Bobby Lashley's pod. And that took Lashley out of the match with what they claimed was a possible concussion. He was under concussion protocol. He was not going to be allowed to return to the match. He never got physical. He didn't do anything. He literally went into his pod in the first 2 minutes of the match. He kind of took a bump, but not really, and they sold it like maybe he hit the back of his head on one of the steel beams. And they just had to do something to get him out of the match. We learned after the show why that is. According to a former WWE writer on the Ringer podcast, claimed that Bobby Lashley was already injured coming into the show, and they shot that angle to protect him from doing anything physical to cover for a very real injury, which is not a concussion, but a shoulder injury that he sustained in his Royal Rumble match against Brock Lesnar. And Lashley is going to be visiting with Dr. Jim Andrews this week. He may need shoulder surgery. I mean, look, if you're going to Dr. Andrews, you're going under the knife. So it may not be official yet, but it sure looks like he's going under the knife. He's going to have shoulder surgery. It could keep him out for at least 4 months. That takes him out of WrestleMania this year. So if it's from the Lesnar match, and I commented on this in my Royal Rumble review about the very awkward way that Lashley was landing on a bunch of those German suplexes. He was taking the full brunt of them right on his shoulder. And Lashley is a big guy. He's every bit of 250, 260. And he was just landing over and over and over again on that shoulder, so I'm not surprised that he got hurt. But that means the WWE knew he was hurt for weeks, and they still advertised him anyway for the men's chamber match. And they flew him all the way to Saudi just to shoot that angle. So that guaranteed that we would have a new WWE champion. Lesnar busted out of his pod last and immediately gave Seth Rollins an F5 and he pinned him. F5 to Matt Riddle, eliminated. Suplex and an F5 to AJ Styles, gone. And that left young Austin Theory to die. He was 24 years old. Still had his entire life ahead of him. Brock stalked him, he beat the piss out of him. Theory did get a low blow in on Brock. All that did, though, was make him angry. He tried to escape through the chains on the roof of the chamber. Brock pulled him back inside. He proceeded to deliver the biggest F5 of all time. Off the top of one of the pods, and Theory took a huge bump down onto the outer padding. He was pinned immediately after, and Brock Lesnar is once again the WWE champion. Not a shocking outcome at all, but the way in which Brock buried each and every person in that match, Seth Rollins, AJ Styles, Matt Riddle, Austin Theory, although he's the heel, who should be running scared of someone like Brock Lesnar, all of them made to look like geeks. Every last one of them. And then people wonder why WWE can't make new stars or why nobody on the roster, even their top names, outside of a very select few, why none of them really feel all that special at all. You know, Lesnar was in studio on Pat McAfee's show the other day. Everybody was talking about it, and I watched the entire thing, and I encourage you to do the same. It was a fantastic interview. It was Brock Lesnar like you've never seen or heard Brock Lesnar before. But there was a part of that interview where Lesnar talked about the younger generation, the current roster, and what they need to do to succeed. He said it's time that some of the younger guys figure out how to get over. And in his words, put fucking asses in seats. Don't worry about your next high spot. Figure out how the hell I can be different. How can I make money? He says they think they need to do the same move over and over, and that's not how it works. It's good guy against bad guy, Tyson against Holyfield. It's telling stories. I don't disagree with a lot of what Brock Lesnar was saying there. I don't think that you can get over to a wide audience by just doing moves and dives. Doing dives does not make you a pro wrestler. Doing dives makes you a gymnast doing a routine. Like a circus performer. And if that's all you have, if the charisma isn't there, if you can't talk, if there's no story, that's fucking boring. And it does plague a lot of wrestling matches today, including in AEW. I still enjoy their show, but there is a sameness to a lot of the matches that we see today, and I think it really sucks. And it's not what wrestling used to be, and I hate that it's turned into that. Everybody has to hit their spots. Everybody has to hit the dives and the topes, and then the next guy does the same thing. That's not what wrestling should be. You need more than that. He's not wrong. But telling people to go get themselves over, go find a way to make money. I don't think WWE is the best place for a talent to do that. You need to have their support. You got to have their blessing. And if you do start to get over on your own without the support of the writers and the executives, it's almost like they resent you for doing it because they didn't come up with it themselves. There have been people who have gotten over or were getting over with the audience. They just weren't getting over with the one person they had to get over with, and that's Vince McMahon. And we've seen examples of this before, whether it was someone like Zack Ryder who had to leave. As many years as he spent in that company, 15 years or whatever it was, he had to go leave, and he got himself over all over again on his own. Rusev with the Rusev Day stuff that they killed off. You know, when your legs are cut off like that, there's only so much you can do. So it's easy for Brock Lesnar to say that, but he doesn't have that problem because he got himself over when he left the company. By the time he came back, and I mean, he was already a WWE champion 3 times when he left the company the first time, but he went out and became a much bigger star. By the time he came back, he was a made man. And the WWE of 2022 is very different than the WWE of 20 years ago when he first debuted. If that Brock Lesnar was coming up now, I'm not so sure that, he would get over at the same level. He might, because he's a freak athlete, but he didn't have the kind of leverage back then that he does now. So for him, of all people, to say what he said, and then I'm watching him give these men yesterday nothing. He gave them nothing. Just mowing him down with a single F5, one by one. These are top names in the company, former world champions. And they're all treated like geeks. I wonder how Brock Lesnar would have reacted if, let's say in the back, when everybody was told what the plan was for the main event, let's say Seth Rollins turned around and said, you know what? Yeah, that doesn't really work for me. Here's what I think we should do. Or if AJ Styles was told what the plan was and here's what Brock wants to do, and he goes, well, you know what? That's going to make me look pretty weak. How about we do it this way? Oh yeah, I'm sure Brock would have been very proud, right? He would have been very proud of them for standing their ground. But in celebrating Black History Month, in celebration of Black History Month, Brock Lesnar has now taken the WWE Championship from every single African-American star to ever hold the title. He took it from The Rock, he took it from Kofi Kingston, he took it from Big E, and he has taken it back from Bobby Lashley. Brock Lesnar has cemented his place in Black history. And it will now be champion against champion, winner take all for both belts in the main event of WrestleMania 38. Brock Lesnar one-on-one against Roman Reigns. WWE made it official, the whole winner-take-all thing after the show on their website. No mention of unification, even though that's exactly what it should be. Only that it is winner-take-all. So we're going to get Brocky 2 belts or Roman 2 belts at the end of WrestleMania this year. And I also don't know where this leaves Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. All of the potential ideas that have been discussed and rumored for him have fallen through. A couple of months ago, it looked a lot like we might be seeing Rollins and Kevin Owens teaming to go after the Raw Tag Team titles. They've gotten away from that. Owens appears to be occupied already. Then I thought, well, maybe they could work him into the Reigns and Lesnar stuff, make it a triple threat. I'm not big on doing triple threats in the main event of WrestleMania, but I think that would have been a great match, and there would have been a reason for him to work himself in there. After the finish of the Royal Rumble match with him and Roman. That's not happening. Not after the way he was booked in that chamber match, it's not. Any hope of that died yesterday. He was supposed to wrestle Shane McMahon before Shane got sent home. And coming out of the chamber, before we found out about Lashley's injury, some people saw what they did with the buckle bomb spot and thought, well, maybe they're setting up Bobby Lashley against Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. Obviously, that was never the case, but that was another thought people had. That's not happening. He's already feuded with Edge. I mean, they could always do Rollins and Styles, but I would want to see Edge against AJ Styles. And AJ made it very clear the other day to Ariel Helwani. Well, actually, they did the interview, I think, the day of the Royal Rumble, but they put the interview out on his YouTube channel. But he told Ariel Helwani that that's the match that he wants too. Who's the one guy you haven't worked with that he didn't hesitate for a second? He said, it's Edge. And he says, Edge feels the same way. So I'd love to see that at WrestleMania. But Seth Rollins right now looks like the man without a plan. But there is one other potential opponent that I have in mind for him, which leads perfectly into our top story this week.